Hi guys, and welcome to the second episode of the Get the Lads Around podcast. Today we have Dan Richardson from DRN Nutrition on. Dan is a performance nutrition expert supporting elite and amateur athletes to perform at their best. Previously, he has worked as a nutritionist with professional teams. Now he owns his own nutrition company, DRN Nutrition, where he supports youth and student athletes to develop nutritional knowledge for athletic development. He is also the nutrition columnist at the hockey paper, providing nutrition advice to readers. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed it, please give it a like and a share. So thanks for coming on, Dan. Obviously really happy to have you here, and this will be, I think this will be a really good podcast for people to listen to. So do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for having me on, Lewis. Appreciate it. And, love what you're trying to do with the podcast. I think it's brilliant. But a bit about myself. I am an owner of a business, so DRN Nutrition. Before that, started out playing rugby. So as a young lad, kind of found rugby as a sport that I enjoyed. Realised probably that I wasn't good enough after a bit of a conversation with my dad. Thought I'm best off being a practitioner. So I went down the route of being a performance nutritionist. That led me to work with some really good athletes, and then also lead on to work for myself within my own company. So it's been a bit of a change over the last couple of years from going from being employed to self-employed, but certainly enjoyed the challenge and reveled in it a little bit. So it's been good.
Yeah, I've seen you work with some huge teams like Man City. I'm a rugby league player myself, so you work with Widnes Vikings and Warrington.
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah. So what's that environment like? Tough or?
Yeah, demanding. So not so much when I was with Man City and Sale, they were more kind of like contracts and smaller kind of workloads. It was more when I got down to the Warrington Wolves side of things and working with them as their head of nutrition that I really found that the level stepped up. So it was, certainly challenging. A lot of 6-7 day work weeks, which I think when you go into sport, you almost see the glamorous side of what the players get. And how they get treated, but you've got to remember that there's a backroom staff that's supporting that. And I think, a lot of the times people working in full-time sport don't get the notoriety that they deserve to be doing the job they are. But yeah, it's very, very tough, high workload. And obviously, it's all results driven. So if the team's performing bad, you're technically liable for it as a nutritionist or a physio or as an S&C, whereas if they're performing good, you almost revel in that success as well and really all get together and enjoy it. So, a lot of highs and a lot of lows working in professional sport, but certainly an enjoyable experience.
Having that pressure on your shoulders must be nuts. Like, you think, people wonder, I think, why football players and that get paid so much, but you could almost argue the pressure that's on their shoulders and the pressure that's on your shoulders and anyone in the backroom staff must just be like, you must have seen some high pressure moments working in those environments.
Yeah, I think it all boils down really because it's results driven. That's your only focus really. In a season, it's results driven. And even though you get off seasons, and I think one thing that I wouldn't say shocked me working in professional sport was certainly a bit of a change to what I was used to. I mean, I was like stacking shelves at Tesco at university and taking long holidays and enjoying my Christmases off. Was the sheer amount of workload. When a season finishes, that's when you're allowed to have your holiday. Yeah. When a season's finished, that's your holiday time. However, you're still in the back of your mind prepping for the following season. Yeah. And I know a lot of guys who I've worked with that have worked in sports and professional sports for years just don't take time off. They're either doing, in season, or then they're doing the national camps, or then they're going on to work for pre-season. And it's kind of a never-ending roller coaster that you can't get off. And I think that's where I kind of found it was a little bit too much. And I think COVID played a big part for me in realizing, and I'm sure most people you chat to probably had like some epiphany in COVID. And I certainly did when it came to working in sport. And I was like, can I sustainably keep doing this, working from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. Every single day. And at the same time, I was personal training still. So I was still seeing clients in the gym after I finished working at Warrington or whichever club I was at. So I had a huge demand on me in terms of work. And, that's where kind of COVID allowed me to, and the lockdowns allowed me to strip it back and realize kind of what I valued most. And to be honest, most of it was I wanted my weekends back. And I wanted control over my own calendar and control over what I was doing. And, don't get me wrong, working for yourself and founding a business is probably as hard, if not harder, than working in professional sport. But it does give me the freedom to book something in 3 months' time, knowing that it's not going to change unless, you know, a big kind of project comes up. So it's good.
And did those working in those environments was mental health a thing ever spoken about? Was it ever, you know, was it as big as it probably should have been? Or...
So I think the best way to describe it in professional sports is mental health's never spoken about, but it's certainly addressed.
Right.
So we do a lot of team bonding stuff. So, for example, our head coach at Warrington at the time was brilliant in getting all of the team together on like a Friday afternoon for a beer, or if it was sunny, he'd pull out a disposable barbecue and we'd all just chat about things that were non-work related.
Yeah.
But in every kind of professional outlook and workplace that I worked at in terms of professional sport, it was never spoken about unless it was like publicized in terms of like, you know, working with a Minds charity or something like that, where we'd have maybe a session where we could go and chat to some of the guys from the charity about the work they do. But we did a lot for the community, and I think that brought everybody together and kind of helped to eradicate some of the mental health issues that may or may not have been going on in the club. But I think a lot of the clubs I worked at, it was never directly spoken about or addressed, but it was certainly addressed with certain activities that were clearly designed to bring people together and remove the stigma of mental health. And I think it worked. And I think in an environment like a rugby team, that's the way to go about it, I think, because if you try to go about it in a way of let's openly talk, which is the way we all want it to go, you know, but sitting around, you often get some of the lads who are probably suffering the most with their mental health, wouldn't be willing to open up, but would also banter the guy next to him who is opening up about their mental health. And, you know, I think that's the stigma that is in around rugby, and you probably see it, you know, playing yourself. And I did certainly when I was a young lad playing, that it wouldn't be something you would open up about. But in a team bonding activity where you're talking about your strengths and weaknesses over a beer and a barbecue, it doesn't seem as pressuresome. So I think that really helped in terms of bringing that together. And they did a lot for the support staff like myself in terms of just bringing us all together for a laugh and a joke, and, you know, team gym sessions before the players got in early in the morning. We'd rock in at 6 a.m. and one of the S&C coaches had put us through our paces in the gym. And it wouldn't really be about who's the fittest. It'd be like just getting there and turning up and, you know, starting the day with a smile on your face, I think was always a key.
That's good. That's good, to be fair, from them. And so then on to running your business. Like, how did you balance that personal life and starting up a business?
I didn't. That's the short answer. Obviously, we go into that, but yeah, I didn't. I mean, my missus now still tells me to shut up about it. We'll be lying in bed at 1 o'clock at night, and I'll be like, "So I've just had a phone call today, and I've signed off on this, or I've signed off on that, or got an exciting project coming in, and you know we've got this going on, and I'm thinking about bringing somebody in full time at the company now. I'm not too sure." And she's like, "It's 10 o'clock at night. I just want to read my book, and go to bed, read yours, and go to bed." So I pull out my Wim Hof book about breathing techniques, start reading through that, and cold ice exposure, and then suddenly I've got an idea that I want an ice barrel in the back garden, and it's I think your mind just, you know, it never stops when it comes to business, and it didn't when I first started. And I think I always tried to set the premise when I first became, say, self-employed before it really became a business, to have weekends off. But then work starts trickling over to the weekends, and it's you know, little things that you say, okay, I'll pick that meeting up on Saturday, and then now I kind of do a little bit of Saturday morning, and then I try and have the weekends off where I can. I think when I started out, it was just, you know, everything you have to, you know, creating contacts, starting to build your network of the people you're going to speak to, the people you're going to, you know, be a part of, is huge when it comes to business. And I think a lot struggle in terms of the demand that's required. And I certainly did at points where I was up till 2 a.m, getting back up at 6 and, you know, trying to just kind of beat the clock and beat sleep, until I realized that, you know, sometimes it's better just to take a breath. It's better just to, you know, have that 8 hours of sleep, because you'll perform so much better the next day. And you know, some of these opportunities I was going for and emailing back at 2 a.m. would still be there at 10 o'clock the next day, or, you know, even a couple of days later. It wasn't a case that it needed to be done there and then. But in my head, if I didn't respond there and then, I'd lose out on the contract, or I'd lose out on the opportunity. Yeah,
and it's like consuming your life almost. And when did you notice that? Did that take a toll on you at all? Did that, you know?
Oh, massively. I think what I noticed most was my like actual ability to turn up to the gym. And that's something that I've always been, coming from a rugby background and playing. I think Sarah retired at 22 when I finished uni. I just was like, I haven't got it in me to play anymore, but I'll continue training almost like a rugby player, functional fitness sessions, lots of strength training.
Yeah.
And then when I noticed that I'd stopped going to the gym, and I think the biggest pinnacle moment for me was I realized I was 3 months without a proper gym week. So I'd done the odd session here and there, but I'd not done 4 or 5 days in the gym for at least a 3-month period. And I just thought something needs to change here. I need to really work on what I'm doing. And then that's when I kind of made the shift of, okay, put your mental health first, put your actual physical health first as well.
Yeah.
And then from there, I can build a much stronger business from, a positive mindset instead of it just being work. And I think I've tried to bring that into a lot of the people I work with. So I work with a lot of directors of sports from schools, and their workload is 7 days a week, fixtures, planning events like a nutritionist coming in like me, and doing all sorts. And myself and them always tend to have a lot of catch-ups about work-life balance. And they always say to me, yours must be terrible though, Dan. And now looking back, I say, well, it was, but I'm getting much better with it. I'm still not perfect. And I try to give them some tips on balancing their workload, trying to mute notifications that you don't necessarily need on your phone, and a bunch of other different kind of like management tips that you can use just to get that balance back a little bit.
Of course. And do you feel like in that time, was there someone you could go to? Was there someone you spoke to? Was there someone you felt you could talk to?
So I've been fortunate in terms of I've had some really good business mentors.
Yeah.
I've got a really good friend of mine who she owns a supplement company who looked after a few of the clubs that I work with. And I could always turn to her and say, look, I've got X, Y, and Z coming up, huge projects. I'm not sure how to manage them. And she'd give me some really good advice, not just from a business perspective, but from a well-being perspective in terms of, tackle the biggest one first. Or the way I like to do it is to do half of one project, then start the next. Then you're halfway through. Give yourself some breathing space. Don't try and focus all in on one. Try to kind of break it up each day and set yourself some hours. And then I have a really good friend, family friend, who's a big business owner in property. And he grew it from the ground up from 23 upwards. And I utilize him a lot, not just from a business point of view, but from a business mindset point of view, in terms of, he goes away on holiday all the time with his missus, and he's always busy with the kids and doing all kinds of fun activities. And I said, how have you got time for this? And he was like, you've just got to find the balance. He was like, if you look at me Monday to Friday, I'm not very much a family man or anything like that. But if I've booked a holiday, it's a holiday. Like the phone stays at home. I don't bring the phone to bed. I don't bring work to the bedroom. I don't bring work home. As soon as I sit down on the sofa, I have my dinner and we talk about today's events, but not work related or business related matters. So that really helps, having those two people in my life. And then I think, as always, your parents. I think parents are always a great influence. My parents have always worked full time for somebody else. My mum does a little bit of consultancy, so she was quite helpful in terms of helping me managing doing consultancy stuff. And my dad was very much grounded. He has every weekend off, early finish on a Friday, working in an office. So he very much has always taught me that structure of work hard during the week, have a little bit of an easier Friday, and then from there go into the weekend and enjoy.
Yeah, that's class. It's like having that, making a clear separation from when you're at work and you're focused on that. But when you're enjoying your own time, you enjoy your own time.
Yes, definitely.
You don't have other things on your mind. You need to just focus on those things each at a time to actually really get that feeling from it, So
Absolutely.
I was thinking, being a nutritionist, do you think what do you think the correlation is between having good nutrition and your mental health? Like, have you done any research into it? Have you? Yeah,
I've certainly looked into it. Not too much in terms of like a place of which I'm able to teach, but a place in which I've looked into it, and the correlation is huge. Like, it's exactly the same, if not more, than like having a good physical fitness routine for mental health.
Yeah,
if you're eating right, you're going to be. And I think eating right's a bit of a tough kind of bracket to fill, because to me it's such an open space. What's eating right and wrong? It's almost like black and white. It's hard to kind of see sometimes, and there's some gray areas within that. But to me, like, eating right and being on top of your nutrition is like not loading the body with junk food, because that's going to cause kind of brain fog and a lack of mental clarity. Not having too many sugars or too much caffeine across the day, especially later in the evening, because you're going to struggle to get to sleep then. So like caffeine is one of the big things I've looked at in terms of well-being nutrition, because I'm terrible for smashing through cups of teas and coffees in the day. Yeah. But once it comes to 3 o'clock, if I know I'm having a finish at around 7, I'm not going to have any more caffeine after 3, because it can have a half-life, which means the effects of the caffeine still last up to 6 hours after drinking that cup of coffee. So if you have a cup of coffee at 3 o'clock, you can still have some caffeine within your system at 9 p.m. And obviously, you want to be settling down for 10 o'clock at night. If you have a coffee at, let's say, 10 o'clock at night, then all the way through till 4 in the morning, you've still got caffeine in the system keeping you awake. So I think there's some simple stuff you can do, like such as managing your caffeine intake, managing your water intake. Something that I'm always big on, and I always tell anybody I work with, is just keep a water bottle as close as you can to you at all times, and just constantly reach for it and sip it, because that way you're always going to hit your daily hydration. If you start becoming dehydrated, we can talk about the negatives and the health negatives, but I think from a mental point of view, it just keeps you focused and keeps you kind of fresh. I've always noticed whenever I hit a bit of a dehydration period, my mind and my body just start to fatigue. I find myself almost wilting into my chair whilst I'm doing work at my desk. Yeah. Whereas if I'm hydrated, I feel like my eyes are bright and I feel like I can breathe clearly and I can kind of lift my chest and keep focusing. And I think, so in terms of actual food, I think I've not really touched on, but just not necessarily avoiding junk food, but just kind of limit the amount of junk food you allow yourself on a daily basis, because a lot of people, especially people working in business, don't have time to cook, or say they don't have time to cook. And again, that's just a work-life balance thing. Put the time aside to cook, same as putting the time aside to go to the gym. Each day you can give an hour to the gym, and even if you're responding to emails whilst you're cooking, you're still cooking a good nutritious meal, and just making sure it's packed full of veggies, full of fresh organic meats, or some sort of vegan or vegetarian protein, and then some carbohydrates as well, because as much as some days you might not move and you fix to a desk, and students are the same, they might not train all the time or be moving and on the move all the time, you're still burning through carbohydrates whilst you sat at your seat. And carbs help the brain to fuel. So if you need to use your brain power, you need carbohydrates in your system. So I think, just having that good balance of food is a great place to start. And then, of course, we can start looking at training and how you're training and how your nutrition might change in terms of maybe a protein shake after training for a quick, easy protein hit, or, managing your foods around your training session is certainly where you can look at it. But I think to answer your question on, well-being and on mental health and nutrition, there's a huge correlation between the two, but quite often it's just getting the simple things right.
Yeah, definitely. I think it could be like a mental thing as well. Like you have a good meal, then you think to yourself, I've just had a good meal. You feel good, you feel better about yourself compared to
definitely.
And you're like, I've just eaten crap again. And it's like, I think it can have a great effect on the mind. It's scary how much the places your mind can take you sometimes.
Yeah, like I always say, like, what's the first thing? I've done it many a times when I was a student. What's the first thing you want to do after you've smashed a large Domino's pizza? It's to lie out on the sofa and go, oh, that was a big meal. I shouldn't have eaten all that. It's not to jump up, start working, or jump on a podcast, or start responding to emails, or start delivering a nutrition session. It's to sit on the sofa and go, oh, I need a minute. So like you say, that exact negative emotion that's almost associated with eating a large pizza, other pizza brands available as well, not just Domino's, of course, Papa John's and the rest of them do. But I think, when you're looking at it, that's your first initial reaction. Whereas if you had some form of chicken fajitas with loads of veg in it and maybe a little bit of spice to give it a bit of a kick, you're like, oh, right, I'm ready to go now. And I think that, like you say, the mind, just fine-tuning the mind like that can really have a massive impact on your mental health overall.
No, that's class, yeah. I was thinking about, obviously, when the big environments you're in, the professional environments, like what would those players do after? Is there anything they do after a big loss? That's because obviously after a big loss, you're down, you're not feeling good. Some players I've seen could be down for a week, 2 weeks. They're still on their mind. Like, was there anything that those players would do that would stop them from feeling that way?
I think it's tough, because a loss is a loss, and you're always going to take a loss hard. And if you don't take a loss hard, then are you really invested in the sport? Are you really invested in what you're doing? And I think, it's giving players time and space was the key for us. It was, whenever I was in a losing changing room, it wasn't go up to the players and start shoving a protein shake and a cereal bar in the face to get them, or a banana to get them refueled and rehydrated and all the rest of it, repairing the muscles. It was just giving them that space and kind of letting them, come and approach you for stuff. I think a lot of players had their own little rituals and things they do to try and get themselves back around, but ultimately they've lost the game. So their mental health is going to be a little low, or at least their mindset's going to be a little low. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's important to have those lows because I think I've heard it many times from psychologists and mindset guys that without the lows, you don't have the highs. So if you try to have a positive changing room after a game, then, I think it's difficult because then how do you celebrate a big win? Because you've not experienced the bottom to be able to experience the top. I remember seeing in the Arsenal documentary, the All or Nothing documentary, where Arteta goes in and he screams at the players for like a good minute straight, and then he just walks out. It doesn't say anything else, and he walks out, and all the players' heads were already down, and they just stayed down. And to me, what Arteta said, not in my experience of working with players, none of those players will have been listening because they'll have been beating themselves up in their own head anyway. And hence why, once he finished talking, most of the players who had their heads down still had their heads down because they were already having the conversation with themselves and starting to build that resilient mindset of, right, when we go again next time, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to be. I think the most important thing is the conversations that you have with yourself in the change room when you lose. And I know the psychologist put a big emphasis on be negative, but don't be destructive. I think that was his kind of mantra was, okay, you can break down your performance of what went bad, but then, turn it into a positive improvement. So next time I need to do more of this. Next time I need to do that. When I get my opportunity again, I'm going to do this. It's not, I'm rubbish. I can't do this. I can't do that. It's, we've had one bad performance. It doesn't define my career. Next time I'm going to focus on, and he says, he used to say, like, every player in the head will just analyze their own game and they'll remember the negatives from the game, especially in a loss. And he used to always try and get that, not necessarily positive mindset, but that improvement mindset out of the players, as opposed to just a complete negative mindset of, I can't. It was all about next time, when I get the opportunity again, start every sentence with that word in your head when you're reviewing your own game, because what that's going to do is create the positive kind of thoughts and emotions around it of what needs improving. So next time you're out on a pitch, you can remember and relay back to the bad times, but they weren't a bad time to just beating yourself up.
Yeah, definitely. No, I completely agree. I was thinking, what is some advice that you'd give to a young person trying to set up a business from what you've been through and what you've experienced? Like a few things you'd say to them that you think you've done wrong or you could have done better, or things you've done well that worked well.
I think first of all, have a good support system around you. I don't believe in doing it solo and doing it on your own. As much as I'm a solo business owner, I rely a lot on my partner, my parents, my family friends, my business friends. I've got people who do similar kind of things to me in the industry, but they do it in their own way. And I kind of relay ideas off them, not just business, but also like, how are you feeling about this situation? With the current kind of economic climate, how are you finding it? And just having people around that you can speak to probably is a bigger factor to building a better business than the business itself. I think in terms of like areas of like going wrong, I think try and niche down. And I know this is becoming almost like a business podcast if I start going into this, but what I found was I was trying to do everything and anything when I first started. So, as a nutritionist, you can cover almost all aspects. So I was delivering, corporate wellness nutrition, and then I was delivering academy level nutrition, and then first team nutrition, school nutrition, any nutrition, basically anything with the word nutrition in front of it, I was putting my hand up to do. And now I try to pick and choose the areas that I focus in. So I like looking at like athletic development, improving a team as opposed to just maintaining. So I still work with a lot of one-to-one professional athletes, but they're kind of away from the business. They're kind of my own little sole trader kind of work. And then the business focus is more on like youth and development athletes and focusing on, creating a better nutritional environment within a team. So I think, niching down is probably one of the the biggest things. Don't try and do everything at once, because you'll never become an expert in your area. I'm not saying I'm an expert yet, but I like to think eventually that, my business and myself will be known as, one of the U4 athletic development nutritionists in the industry that's leading it. So probably that's one of my biggest bits of advice. And I think that's where I went wrong when I first started, was I was basically taking on any client and everybody. And I think the saying is, don't jump over pennies for pounds. Oh, sorry, don't jump over pounds for pennies. Focus on the main goal, focus on what you want to achieve in terms of your business. Don't just pick up the pennies on the way because somebody's offered you, a couple of quid to deliver a 1-to-1, even though they're some randomer from a gym. Choose the projects you're actually passionate about, because I can guarantee you, like I found a year in, I was delivering, some 1-to-1s to people who weren't listening to the nutrition I was giving. And it was almost like, there's no point me sending any kind of additional information because you aren't going to read it. You just want a nutritionist to say you've got one. And, I soon kind of got rid of them and then put my focus into the athletes and the schools and the clubs that were really interested in it, and just doubled down on my value asset of what I could deliver to them. And that creates a much more positive business. Because believe it or not, it's not always about the money. And I think I thought that become self-employed, money's king. I'll earn loads of money, retire early, sit on my yacht. And it actually, once you get into it, you realize it's not about the money. It's about enjoying the process and enjoying, your time in business. And I think if I look back now, probably 2-3 years ago when I started, all I thought was, in 3 years' time, I want to be mega rich and just like paying people to do stuff. But now I'm at a pinnacle point in my career where I'm trying to decide whether to take somebody on, and I almost don't want to let my little baby go into someone else's hand. And I'm like, I need somebody to start helping with some of the workload instead of just consultants that I use at the moment. But I'm like, do I, don't I? And that's a mental mind game in itself, because, you've almost like raised this child that is the business. And now you're sending it off to daycare with somebody else for them to go and look after it and take the product to a school, let's say, and deliver a session. And I'm like, but what if they don't deliver it how I deliver it? And it's that real hard striker balance to be like, but then I'm not going to be able to deliver that session at all because I'm already booked in somewhere else. So it's trying to work out. That's the headaches I've got at the moment now, which is a nice headache to have, I must agree, but it still plays, on your mental. You kind of physically and mentally drains you thinking about it, because you're trying to work out the best solution possible without, A, damaging the business, and B, what the last thing I want to be doing is stressing about what another person's doing within a company. I should have full trust and just let them go and do whatever. So it takes time to get to that stage, I think, but when I am there and mentally ready to take someone, and that's my next kind of challenge to overcome.
It's a good challenge to have, I think. And it would be a worry in the back of your mind. I can see why, because I know when you say, a lot of business people I speak to that run their own business are scared of almost giving away what they started to someone else to put the trust in their hands, and to let them provide something for someone. And it's like, will they do it how I've done it? Are they gonna mess this up for me? Are they gonna ruin it? And so I can see what would be a massive worry on the back of your mind, sort of thing.
Yeah, it takes me back almost like when I was at Durham University playing for their rugby league team, and it was like my final year, and I had such almost anxiety about leaving the club and worrying about where the club was going in the next year, because we'd just been promoted kind of back to back into one of the top leagues. And I'd had a big involvement in the club. I spent a year as captain, so second year university I captained the team. OJ took a step back because of my studies, but still played week in, week out, as many of the 80 minutes of what I could play. I tried to, as much as I'd probably pull up with a hamstring or whatever other injuries I'd like to try and pretend I had, to get off the field. But no, I think I remember feeling at the kind of the AGM that we had at the end of the season. I was looking around the room at the boys that were left, and I was like, are we in capable hands or not? And, it was reminding myself that, look, a lot of these boys have come through, good teams, good players. All we need is a couple of extra lads to join in first year, and we've got another brilliant team. We've not lost kind of the spine of the team. The fullback and the halfbacks were still there. I was playing hooker, so I was in the middle, but we had a brilliant second hooker that was going to take my place, that had kind of jumped on when he needed to, and probably was a better hooker than me, but my age kind of surpassed him a little bit with that. And I think, it got to that point where we were at that at that level. So I think it takes me back to that time of worrying, but then they went on and got promoted again back to back for the next year and got to the top league. So I try and think back to something that's kind of reminiscent of that period of time. And that was certainly one of them. And I was like, right, if I can leave something like that in good hands, as long as I can pick the right people like we did with the team that we had back then, my business should be fine as well.
No, that's class. And so would you tell a young business person to expect failure? Is it something that you've suffered with? Like, is it something that you shouldn't let, bring your mental health down, but expect it and move forward with it? And it's a learning curve sort of thing.
I think failure is important. Like you can't not fail in business. Like to this day, like yesterday, I had a message yesterday of a contract that's fallen through with a school. Right. That they've decided to go with somebody else because they're cheaper. Now I can't do anything about that. I have my price, and I'm one of these that I'm quite stringent on. I'm not going to lower the price to match somebody else because you end up in the rat race of to the bottom to the point it becomes unprofitable. And you accept that. And I think no one else coming to this podcast today, I had to think about, reflect of how I feel when this happens. You get a sinking heart feeling like, oh, we've lost out on one here. Yeah. But it's how quickly you can turn that into a positive of, okay, we've lost out on a contract here, but what have we currently got going on this week? I'm at a school this afternoon. I'm delivering to Team Bath straight afterwards online. Tomorrow I'm at another school delivering a session. I've got a really exciting weekend down at the Rugby League World Cup final. It's like, you just think of the positives that are coming up, and actually you can't win everything, because if you win everything, you wouldn't have the time to do it. And I see this so much in my industry, and I have a lot of good conversations with other practitioners. You have one or two people like myself who I love opening up and chatting to people and speaking about, the nutrition market and how to get into it and working it. And there's others that are just closed books. They don't want to give away their secrets. And to me, there's not enough I'll rephrase that. There's enough business to go around, and there's not enough of me for all the business.
Right. Okay.
So if one of my friends, for example, is taking a job at West Ham as their academy nutritionist, I don't want a job at West Ham as the academy nutritionist, because I've got my own thing going on. As much as working for West Ham would be brilliant in their academy, and it's an amazing opportunity, I haven't got enough time and resources to give to a full-time job and a business. So I'm happy, I'm happy to help. Or like I had a guy who reached out on LinkedIn and said, I see you work in schools. How did you get into it? And sent me about 6 questions. And I just said, look, give me a phone call, because I can tell you exactly how I did it. And he was like, why'd you give away what you've worked on? I said, I'm not giving it away. He said, I physically would not be able to work with every school possible. But in the country, I think of private schools, there's a ridiculous amount. And they're kind of the independent schools is what we focus in, because they have elite performance academies. I said to him, we're never, ever going to get to a point where, there might be some points where you actually rival me, but that keeps me on my toes as a business owner. Like, what can I do? Competition's good, it's healthy. And I think failure is good and it's healthy, and I think dealing with it, it's just important to not get in that hole of, I've just lost a contract, or this has just failed in the business, or I've just launched a product that we didn't hit the numbers we wanted to. It's all a learning curve. So to me, as soon as you fail something in business, take that learning opportunity, don't take the failure. So the positive out of a failure is you can learn from it. So take the learning from it. And then even if you're still struggling to learn anything from it, think about the positives that you've got that outweigh that one failure. For every one time I fail, I probably succeed maybe 5 times. Right. So I have a 5 in 1 chance of failing. Now, if that occurs 2 times on the bounce, in my head, what I try and say to myself, well, look at you, because you're gonna have 10 successful runs here. It might not happen like that, but in that moment, it takes you out of that hole and it puts you back into a good positive mindset for work. And that's how I try to see it. It's a game at the end of the day. Work business is a game, and I think you don't win every game. You don't keep clean sheets every game. You are going to concede some goals. It wouldn't be right if you didn't. So and it'd be boring if everybody said yes. I wouldn't want to work. I'd spend 6 months and just expect yeses from everybody, work 6 months, then take a year off, knowing I could come back and everybody would say yes again. So having some no's makes you question what you do and makes you work on what you need to.
Definitely. And you can transfer it over to just life in general as well, failing in life but moving forward, sort of thing.
Definitely.
I think it's huge that you just you need those failures to learn, but they're only going to make you better. That's a big thing for a lot of people to understand. But yeah, but I think that'll be everything. Thank you for coming on. It's been class. I hope you have obviously a good rest of the week, and I think this is a great podcast for many people to listen to. Going over the mental health and how it links to nutrition and vice versa. And for any young athletes, any young businessmen coming up, I think this will be a good one for them to listen to. So yeah, thank you for coming on.
I agree. And I think, one of the big things is always reach out. I think, something that we don't mention enough is whether that be for mental health or for business or for job opportunities, always reach out. The amount of times I reached out when I was going for jobs just to ask somebody in a similar position to where I wanted to be, how did you get there? And the answers you get, it can take you 10 years to figure them out, but they'll tell you it in 10 seconds. And, that's the beauty of having social media and networking. And, that's how we connected over Instagram. And that's how I stumbled across this podcast. And I think just always reach out, not just from a mental health point of view, of course, reach out from a mental health point of view. But, in life, there's so many people out there that are willing to help you succeed. Yeah. And I think it's finding those people. And again, if you fail in reach out again to somebody else. It's not the end of the world. So I think, really enjoyed this podcast, really enjoyed being a part of it. And hopefully, we can help some people out with this as well. Anybody in, young, inspiring business owners that are looking to kick on and push on with that. Hopefully we can take something away from this.
Yeah. Best of luck with your business. And I'm looking forward to hearing about it in the future.
Thank you.
On my screen. So cheers, Dan.
Excellent. No worries.